All right, so our lesson today is over the least common multiple. So our learning target is I can find the LCM of two integers. And all that the LCM is just a shorter way of writing least common multiple. So when we think back to yesterday, what are multiples? Our definition was the results of multiplying a number by every integer. So when we think about an example of this, we want to list multiples of 8. Well, the multiples of 8, 8 times 1 are 8, 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 3 is 24, 8 times 4 is 32, and so on. So another example, which is a little bit easier for people, are the multiples of 10. So 10 times 1 is 10, 10 times 2 is 20, 10 times 3 is 30, and so on. So one way to think about multiples so that it doesn't seem so new to you all is that in elementary school you learned about skip counting. And all the skip counting was counting by the same number over and over. So the multiples of 2 were 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, so on. The multiples of 5 were 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and so on. So when we look at our multiples, such as multiples of 10, we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. So what we're going to be doing with these multiples today is we're going to be finding the least common multiple. So the least common multiple is the smallest multiple that two numbers have in common. And again, the abbreviation is LCM. And the first way we're going to find the LCM is to list all the multiples of each number we're given until there is one in common in both lists and numbers. So if we look at an example of this, first of all, we want to draw our t-charts like we were doing yesterday. And then we're given our numbers 12 and 14. And again, we're finding the least common multiple of those. So we have 12, we have 14. Well, the first multiple of each of these numbers are the numbers themselves. So we have 12 and 14. But we list the next multiple for each. We're going to be multiplying the numbers by 2. So we end up with 24 and 28. Next, we multiply the numbers by 3, and we get 36 and 42. And we keep going. We have 48, 56. If we look, there's nothing in common between these both lists yet. So we go to the next one. We have 60 and 70. There's nothing in common. Then we multiply by 6. We get 72 and 84. Still nothing in common. Well, we multiply 12 by 7. We get 84. We just had 84 in the list for 14, and we just had 84 in the list for 12. That's the smallest number that occurred in both lists. So that is the least common multiple of 12 and 14. It's 84. And sometimes we get lucky and the numbers occur really close to each other. Sometimes they do not. So you constantly have to be checking back in both lists to see if there has been anything in common yet. And for a lot of students, they say this is a lot of writing, this is a lot of work. And sometimes it's worse than this. You might have to go 15 or 20 numbers into a list before you find something in common. So what we learn next is a shorter method. And the shorter method is called the division ladder. And all of this is you divide each number by the common factors that we learned about last week until there's no common factors left. Then we take all the common factors that we have and multiply it by the quotients that we end up with on the bottom. So we have finally common multiple of 10 and 16. If we look at this for our first example, we have a division symbol, but it doesn't look normal because the line's going across the bottom instead of the top. But that's because we're climbing down the ladder to get to our final answer. So what we do is we take our numbers we're given, 10 and 16, and both of those will go inside the division symbol. Then our common factor of 2 will go outside of these. And again, the reason why 2 is a common factor that you should automatically know is because with our divisibility rules, any even number is divisible by 2. So when we divide 10 divided by 2, we will get 5, and 16 divided by 2 will give us 8. Does anybody have any questions so far? No? Okay. So now we take the common factors on the left, in this case we only have one of those, and multiply it by the numbers on the bottom. So we have 2 times 5 times 8. And again, that will give us 10 times 8, which leaves us with 80, and that's your least common multiple. And this is a whole lot less work than listing the multiples out for each of these numbers. If you wanted to do that, you would find that you would have to go all the way to the 8th multiple of 10 and the 5th multiple of 16 before you got to this. This is a lot less writing, and for some people, this is a lot easier. So let's look at another example of this. And before we move on to the other example, one thing I want to say real quick is that making an L along the outside numbers and the bottom numbers for LCM helps people remember which numbers to use. So our next one, we want to find the LCM of 8 and 20. Again, both of these numbers are even. So we put the 8 and the 20 on the inside, and we're going to divide them both by 2 because that's a common factor. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 20 divided by 2 is 10. Again, both were even, so we can divide those by 2. And we end up with 2 and 5 on the bottom. Nothing will go into both of these except for 1, and 1 will not get you anywhere because we're going to get 2 and 5 over and over. So we don't ever want to use 1 for this. And I know in the examples we've used 2 every time, but again, if 2 doesn't work, keep checking your factors and seeing if they will go into both numbers. But moving on, we have 2 times 2 times 2 times 5 because that's our factors and the numbers left at the bottom. And after we multiply this out, we end up with 8 times 5, which is 40. And that's our least common multiple. And again, for those of you who tend to forget which numbers to use, make the L along the outside and the bottom. And even though it doesn't look like a normal L, it still kind of looks like an L. Does anybody have any questions? All right. So what I want you all to do is to use either method or both methods if you want to, and find the least common multiple of 16 and 28. I want to give you about 4 or 5 minutes to do this. If you need help, raise your hand and ask for help, or use one of your neighbors if they understand what they're doing and talk to each other and figure it out. Does anybody have any questions before I let you get started? All right, you all can go ahead.